All right, I want to talk about all of my favorite budget backpacking gear, or just cheap, affordable gear. In some cases, this is just an alternative to a much fancier, much more expensive thing, while in most cases, this budget stuff, this cheap gear, is what I will choose over the fancy, expensive stuff. Now, almost all of what I'm about to talk about is stuff that I have personally used for hundreds, if not thousands of miles while backpacking and hiking. So this is like really stuff that I like, that I use, and that I would recommend to others. So anyway, let's get into this. Clothing, cooking, sleeping, and then just some miscellaneous items. So we're gonna start out with clothing. My first item here is a rain jacket. This is a Frog Togs rain jacket. It only costs $20 and it weighs 5.9 ounces. If you're gonna go with one of these, which I've used these for thousands of miles, the only thing you have to watch out for is it getting rips and holes. So if you use one of these, you should probably carry a little bit of duct tape with you just in case it gets a hole, because they are not very durable. But for $20 and for 5.9 ounces, like, this is really an incredible rain jacket. Now, next up, we have some wind pants. So these wind pants that I'm going to recommend are only $26, and I think you can get them even cheaper than that, and they only weigh 3.9 ounces. So extremely, extremely lightweight for a really nice layer to go on top of your legs. These are actually not made as wind pants at all. They are made as dance pants. They're so that dancers can warm up before they go into their routine. Something super, super lightweight, something that's going to trap your body heat in, and something that you can get very, very cheap and easily. Before we go any further, there will be links to absolutely everything I'm going to talk about in the description below. It will also work as a nice checklist, as what I'm going to recommend here will be an entire backpacking kit. So everything you see here will make up an entire gear list that you could use on something like the Appalachian Trail. Now, this next item I don't have on me, but it's something that my girlfriend used for 1,000 miles last year, and we were both really happy with it. What I'm talking about are Cascade Mountain Tech trekking poles. These are only $30 on Amazon, and they are extremely nice. Trekking poles will not only help you avoid injury while hiking, as they are taking weight off of all of your joints, off of all of your muscles, off of your feet, but many tents these days, including the tent I'll recommend later, requires trekking poles to set them up. So all around, I feel that 99% of people ever hiking should probably use trekking poles, and I think these are a really wonderful budget option. So the next item I'll recommend is some socks. These are darn tough socks. The thing that's really great about them is that they have a lifetime warranty. So these are my socks. These are socks that I wore on the Pacific Crest Trail, and they currently have a hole in them. What I can do now is fill out a quick little form on Darn Tough's website, and they will send me a brand new pair in return, free of charge. So that is $22 for essentially a lifetime pair of socks. Now, the next thing I'll recommend is a bandana. You probably already own a bandana, and if you don't, you can probably find one for like $3 at your local arts and crafts store. You can use it as a rag to wipe off condensation from your tent in the morning. You can use it to clean yourself at the end of a long, muddy, dirty day. That you can use it like a bank robber would. You can use it to cover your face to add extra warmth, or you can use it to cover your face in more of a desert, dry environment where there's a lot of just blowing debris and sand. So a bandana, really fantastic, multi-use kind of item and extremely cheap. Now, the next thing I'll recommend is a neck gaiter or a buff. It's essentially just like a warm, breathable fabric in a tube. Now, this one weighs only 1.2 ounces. It's extremely cheap. I've been using this all winter and have really been blown away at how useful it is to keep myself warm. So for just 1.2 ounces, you can use something like this to cover your ears, to cover part of your head, to cover your mouth and your face. So I think it's a really great option if you're looking for more warmth in camp without having to spend a lot of money. Now the next thing is similar to the neck gaiter. It is just a beanie. This is, in particular, a Z-Packs beanie. The reason I recommend this one in specific is that I've used this for more than 10,000 miles of my hiking, and it has been on almost every thru hike that I've ever done, and it's still in perfect condition. So obviously, you wear a beanie on top of your head. It keeps your noggin warm. It keeps your ears warm. I wear mine every single night when I go to sleep because I like to cover my eyes with it and use it kind of as an eye mask to prevent myself from waking up at the absolute crack of dawn. Now up next, this is a bug head net. This one's made by Sea to Summit. It cost me about $15 and I think it only weighs 0.8 ounces. So again, extremely lightweight, and this is a lifesaver if you're hiking anywhere that has mosquitoes or gnats or black flies or anything like that. So you just wear a baseball cap, you put it over your head, and it prevents any mosquitoes from biting you. Sometimes I will even use this as a pillow at night. I'll stuff all my unused clothes in there and then I'll sleep with my head on top of this. So before we move on from clothes, I want to talk about a few items that I personally don't own. And in specific, it's just one brand as a whole, and that is Decathlon. They make extremely cheap gear that is more than good enough. Now, first up, they make a puffy jacket, a down puffy jacket for just $80. In size large, it weighs 10.5 ounces. So it's very competitive in the weight when it comes to jackets that cost literally 3 times more than it. Next up, they make a fleece for hiking that only costs $20 and weighs 7.5 ounces. So I love fleeces. I think 7.5 ounces is a very great weight for a fleece, and for $20, it's that much better. So that's Decathlon. Now, the first thing in regards to food that we'll talk about is my food bag. This is a 15-liter food bag that weighs 0.8 ounces. So this one is made by Sea to Summit. I think it's a great bag. It's proved to be pretty durable, especially for the price, as I've used it for like nearly 4,000 miles now, and I really like it. The next two things I don't have on me, but I have used for hundreds, thousands of miles in the past. The first of that is an OP sack. It's an odor-proof bag, and it looks like just a really robust Ziploc. So because it is odor-proof, that is typically what I will use when I am in bear country. I don't know how odor-proof it really is, but it certainly makes me feel a lot better to have it. So the odor-proof bags in the past have cost me about $20, and I think they send like a pack of 2 or a pack of 3, and each one only weighs 1.5 ounces. Now, the next thing I'll recommend is a little plastic spoon. I've been using plastic spoons instead of titanium ones or fancy ones for many thousands of miles, and I've always been happy with them. I don't think you really need a fancy spoon, and in fact, I think you could just go in your kitchen and use a stainless steel spoon if you wanted, but a plastic spoon is going to be a lot lighter. They've worked great for me for many years. I think I'm getting snowed on now. So anyway, the next thing I'm gonna talk about is this little plastic jar. You would use this instead of having a stove and a cook pot and a fuel and all that stuff. So you use this for something called cold soaking. You put your food in it, your dehydrated food, you add water, you wait something like 15 minutes to an hour, if that, and then you can just eat it at room temperature. Something like this costs like, I don't know, $6, and it comes with ice cream at first. So you get to enjoy some ice cream, and then you have a nice little piece of backpacking gear. Maybe in the next month, I'm gonna make a video with all of my favorite recipes for cold soaking. So check that out if you do decide to go this route. Now, if you love your warm coffee, you gotta have your warm coffee, then we gotta start recommending a stove instead. So I think the cheapest stove on the market and the best stove for the price is the BRS 3000T. I have it right here. It's very tiny. I think it only weighs 0.9 ounces and it only costs $16. So extremely lightweight, extremely cheap, and I think it's a fantastic little stove. So if you gotta have your warm meals, the cold soaking sounds terrible, then definitely the BRS 3000T is what you want. Now, as for a cook pot to use with your stove, frankly, you could use just about any aluminum pot that you have lying around inside of your home. For the first 2 years of my backpacking, I just used one of my mom's aluminum pots on top of my little tiny camp stove. So any aluminum pot will do, but I did find one on Amazon that I'll recommend and have linked down below. Now, as for water bottles, you don't need a fancy, expensive like Nalgene. The water bottle that most people will buy is a smart water bottle. Now, you're gonna want that one in particular for another reason, because most water filters will screw onto a smart water bottle, whereas some water bottles you find, a lot of filters just won't screw onto them. So the filter that I've used for a very long time in the past is a Sawyer Squeeze. I don't have one right now because I ruined it on the last desert hike that I did, but I've used them on many trails in the past and have really enjoyed them. In the future though, I'm gonna start using a different filter, and I'm gonna use the Platypus Quick Draw. The reason why I'm gonna use that instead of the Sawyer Squeeze in the future is it just looks so much easier to clean. It's just $25 on Amazon and it weighs 3.3 ounces. The last little filter I'll recommend, and what I've used for thousands of miles, is a chemical treatment for water. It's called Aquamira, and it comes in 2 little tiny bottles that you mix together and add to your water. And then about 30 minutes to an hour later, you can drink that water and it has been chemically cleaned. So there's some cases where a chemical treatment is better than these other filters, but it is sometimes a little bit annoying to have to take the 2 bottles to mix the mixture and then to have to wait like 30 minutes to an hour. Whereas those other like squeeze style filters, you can just drink that water immediately straight out of the bottle through that filter. But if you're really trying to save money, Aquamira is definitely as cheap as it gets. I think it costs like $15, and those 2 bottles are gonna last you quite a long time. So moving on from cooking, and we're gonna look at camping, like sleeping, shelters, and stuff like that. The first kind of shelter that I'm gonna recommend is a tarp. A tarp is not for everybody, so I'll have a couple other recommendations here. This is a Sil Nylon 7x9 tarp from Bora Gear. It costs $70 and it only weighs 7 ounces. They're extremely cheap, they're as light as it gets, but they're harder to use for sure. I use tarps on the vast majority of my hikes. They're not for everybody and they're not for every trail. Harder to use, no bug netting, so most people are gonna want a tent instead. So the tent that I'm gonna recommend is a little bit more expensive. There's definitely cheaper ones out there, but this is about as good as it gets, and for a really cheap price, considering how amazing it is. This is the Durston Gear X-Mid 1. It is made out of Sil Poly, and it is a top of the line tent. You're really not gonna get any much better than it unless you spring for that same tent in a much fancier fabric. Do you really wanna be out in the middle of nowhere and be using a really cheap tent? I don't think so. So $240 is pretty darn cheap when it comes to what you're getting with the Durston X-Mid 1. Now, regardless of tent or tarp, you're gonna want some tent stakes. These are tent stakes that I bought at Walmart, and I keep telling myself that once I break these, I'll replace them with something nicer. And here we are 8 years later. So just some really cheap Walmart tent stakes. They've been working for me for a very long time. So this next thing that I'm talking about is a ground sheet. You're going to put this underneath your tent to extend the life of your tent. So I have 2 here that I recommend. One is Tyvek and one is Polycryo. They're going to extend the life of your tent, allowing you to not have to replace your tent sooner, which in the end saves you money for buying something extremely cheap and lightweight like these. So the next thing we'll talk about is foam pads. Foam pads aren't gonna be for everyone, but if you're going for budget-friendly backpacking, then a foam pad is definitely the answer. Inflatable pads are more comfortable, they are warmer, but they are 3 to 4 times to 5 times the price of a foam pad. So there's a lot of nice, thicker foam pads out there that I think are great and cost only like $25. Decathlon, who we talked about before, makes a nice one that's very cheap. And then I found another one on Amazon that's a little bit cheaper, but maybe not quite as nice. A quilt is another thing, much like a tent, where it's like, I'm not sure I would really feel comfortable and safe with a extremely cheap quilt. So what I'm gonna recommend is the Enlightened Equipment Apex Revelation quilt. It uses synthetic insulation, so it's a lot cheaper than if you were going with a down quilt. I think it costs $230 and it weighs 25 ounces. So pretty darn ultralight, pretty darn cheap, and it's really coming from a top-of-the-line brand that I know you can trust with your safety and with your warmth. So a synthetic quilt is much cheaper than a down quilt, and this is the one that I would personally use and recommend for budget backpacking. Now, moving on to more miscellaneous stuff, the first thing we'll talk about is my favorite little flashlight. This is the flashlight that I've been using for, I don't know, the past 3-4 years, and it is one of my favorite pieces of gear. I can clip it onto my hat, so I can use it like a headlamp. It glows in the dark, so it's easy to find at night. It has multiple different light settings, and I really, really love this flashlight. It costs $35 and it weighs 0.6 ounces. This is the Rovi Von Aurora A5, I believe. The other thing I'll recommend is not something I own, but is a staple in the ultralight backpacking world, and that is the NU25 headlamp by Nitecore. It also costs about $35. It is also very lightweight. I think weighs like 1.9 ounces. It's like the most popular headlamp in all of ultralight backpacking. So it's hard to really beat that if you want a headlamp instead of a flashlight. Now, the next thing we'll talk about is a pack liner. A pack liner is just a trash bag. That's it. They make some fancy pack liners out there that weigh very little. This one weighs 1 ounce, but literally all you need as a pack liner is a nice thick trash bag. And it waterproofs everything inside of your pack. So no need for a fancy waterproof pack or anything like that. All you need is a pack liner to go inside of your pack. A waterproof pack is gonna cost you like $400, so I don't even use waterproof packs. I like these more. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is blister care. This is a roll of Leukotape, and it costs $10, and this is what I use to take care of my feet when I feel a hot spot coming on, when I feel a blister coming on. So every trip I will ever go on, I bring Leukotape. This is a Deuce of Spades trowel. It costs like $15, it weighs like ½ an ounce, and I think these days it's just essential. I carry a trowel on every trip that I go on because, you know, you gotta leave no trace. You don't want anyone out there finding your toilet paper and your stuff, and you don't want to find anyone else's toilet paper and stuff. So you got to carry a trowel. I'm going to carry a trowel. Everyone needs to carry a trowel. $15, ½ an ounce. It's like paper thin. You just got to have one of these, and it's definitely an awesome budget piece of gear. All of my small little items, I put them inside of Ziploc bags. We all already own them. You can get them super easily anywhere should they fail, and they are waterproof. So I use these Ziplocs for pretty much everything, and that's what I think you should use instead of buying fancy, expensive stuff sacks. Okay, the last thing we're gonna talk about, backpacks. So what I'm gonna tell you to do with backpacks is I want you to shop sales. There's so many great sales out there where you can get 30 to 40 to 50% off nice backpacks. So I think you should shop sales, but I will recommend 2 brands. I think you should check out Granite Gear because they have some really fantastic, really trustworthy, really nice backpacks for fairly cheap. We're talking about $100 to about $200. The other company and the other backpack I think you should check out specifically is the ULA CDT backpack. It costs about $200, but it's one of the nicest backpacks out there. It's one that I certainly recommend to a lot of people. It has a great suspension system inside, and I think it's a fantastic backpack that's gonna last you a really long time. Anyway, that is all of my favorite budget gear. If you found this video valuable, if you like this video, give me a little thumbs up. If you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe to this channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. It is really cold out here.